Today, we're going to talk about booze. How many times in your gaming career have you wound up in an inn or a tavern or something like that? Heck, most adventures freaking start there. Have you ever stopped to wonder what's on the drink menu and how might that help my game? Us human types have been fermenting booze for thousands of years, and some historians have even posited that it was alcohol, not bread, that caused our ancestors to give up their hunter-gatherer ways. And before anyone asks, I am not a booze historian. I don't even play one on TV. For those of you who have no idea how alcohol works, good news, it's really easy. Let's start with water. That seems perfectly reasonable. To that, we're going to add some kind of starch. Maybe a grain, something like barley. Maybe some fruits. Who knows? Whatever you have on hand. Next, if there's a magic step, and I'm not sure that there is, we're going to hit it with some kind of yeast. Maybe an airborne variety. Maybe from our last batch. Maybe it's something we have prepared. Then we're going to wait a long time, and then we're going to have a party. And sure, you can get good and hammered on that. But why stop there? Why don't we take some of the water out and get good and hammered even faster? We call that distilling. It's not like us humans are known for our restraint. Like chilies, which have different names for raw, dried, and smoked versions, fermented and distilled drinks have different names too. I'll give you two examples. Grapes are fermented into wine, and then distilled into brandy. Grain is fermented into beer, and then distilled into whiskeys and other stuff. But why stop there? Our ancestors didn't. Go deprive some bees of their honey and make mead. Get yourself some rice, make sake, distill it for rice wine. I've never heard of a potato beer, maybe somebody drinks it. But distill your potato beer, and you get vodka, favorite of campuses everywhere. Can we take it further? Oh, of course we can. Most fruits are fermentable. Cherries turn into cherry wine. Pears turn into perry. Take your favorite apples, ferment them into cider, and then distill them further into applejack, which is a favorite of our founding fathers. But what does it all mean? Can we use any of this stuff? And more importantly, are there any hazards? Many of you are probably familiar with Cognac, a very fancy kind of brandy, from a very specific place in France. If your elves are drinking elven cognac, that probably doesn't make sense, unless your elves are French, which I suppose they could be. I don't know your elves. Similarly, Scotch is whiskey, specifically from Scotland. If your dwarves are drinking dwarven Scotch, that also doesn't make sense. Along the same lines, we don't usually get cider in a desert, because it's really hard to grow apple trees there. And now we're getting into the really interesting stuff, how to increase the verisimilitude of our game worlds. And I will give you but two examples. We're going to imagine a dwarven merchant leaving his Undermountain home. Maybe he's got a caravan. Maybe he's off to some human settlement. Maybe they drink this weird thing. Weird thing that they don't have in the Undermountain because grain doesn't grow there. They drink beer. And let's imagine this dwarf gets really excited about this beer and wants to take it home and impress all of his friends. So let's fast forward a little bit. 10 years, 15 years. Let's imagine this same dwarf, this same merchant, who's now created a beer craze in the Undermountain. But they have a problem because they can't grow grain there. What do? You import it. In my fantasy world, dwarves are the quintessential traders, so it's not hard to imagine them importing in very large bulk from wherever they could get it from. But that's expensive. That's really expensive. What can you do to make this better? Remember brandy? Brandy was developed in the 15th century by taking wine and distilling it for ease of transport. It's not a long stretch to imagine dwarves coming up with the exact same solution. And then we get whiskey. And the world rejoices. Now let's imagine those same enterprising dwarves trying to cut their costs, because importing is really expensive, even if you distill it. Why not set up your own farms, wherever you could buy land? Hire some people to work the land. Get yourself a nice brewing tradition, a nice brewing and distilling tradition. While I love my dwarves, and I do love my dwarves, we have just gone from what do they drink to what must be true. This time we're to go from what do they have to what do they drink. This, or maybe this, I don't know which side it's on, is cedarwood. Smack dab in the unimaginatively named Black Wood. It's in the middle of a forest. So what grows there? Fruit trees, pretty much a given. Grapes, maybe. Roots, turnips, potatoes, that kind of thing. Sure. We take inspiration from sweet pods from Dwarf Fortress and sugar beets from the real world and imagine a sweet root, a native tuber that grows in the area. We imagine this as being a staple crop, something that they grow for fun and profit, although mostly to not starve over the winter. And then for thousands of years that the site has been inhabited, selectively breeding these to be sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. It can't have taken long for someone to say, hey, I bet we can brew that. We imagine these things as tasting something like a sweet potato, maybe a really sweet turnip or rutabaga or something like that. So we imagine the drink as being kind of perfumed, maybe a little earthy, but really, really sweet. But why stop there? Why don't we distill it? Let's make it into something even better, even more potent. Because we're starting with something really, really sweet, kind of like what you get out of a sugar cane, you imagine that when it distills, it's going to be a lot like rum. but because it's Coba, we call it Crumb. And I'll bet you they have their own drinking tradition here too. They've been doing it for thousands of years. Why wouldn't they? I'll bet you they okayed this stuff. They put all kinds of herbs and spices and, well, whatever they can find in the forest in it. Mushrooms or God knows what. If I was playing a character from this area, maybe traveling far and wide to the far reaches of the realm, I'd miss it, right? I'd be looking for it. They don't make it anywhere else. I can only get it from home, maybe imported. It's kind of like my unabiding love for Werners, which no one else has even heard of. Like just about every reasonably interesting thing, this is a really deep rabbit hole. You can spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff, hopefully making your world just a little bit more interesting. But that's honestly enough for one video. If you want to learn more, I've written a long-form post, which I will link in the doobly-doo. They say that games tend to represent the interests of their designers, so I guess that makes me an alcoholic. Shoot, I'll see you next time.